So today I'm going to be talking about what's on your paleo autoimmune plate. So if you are coming to a paleo diet from a place of trying to manage an autoimmune disease, you have probably heard of this thing called the Paleo Autoimmune Protocol. So what this is a list of additional restrictions. So on top of a standard paleo diet where we're avoiding grains, legumes, dairy, refined oils, refined sugars, and processed foods, there's this list of extra things that you don't get to eat. Nuts, seeds, eggs, nightshades, which includes tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, chilies, spices like red pepper and cayenne and paprika. No alcohol, no coffee, no chocolate, and really no dairy, not even the grass-fed, butter, yummy kind. And so if you are battling with an autoimmune disease and you see this list of restrictions, this is the typical reaction. Okay, this is how most of us feel when we're like, what is there to eat? Well, this is why I really dislike thinking about the Paleo Autoimmune Protocol as a list of no's. And I really want to change the focus to what we do eat. And there's actually two reasons for this. The first is it's just better for our mental health to focus on the positive. But the second is if you're approaching diet from a restriction standpoint, you're missing one major component of how to manage autoimmune disease with diet, and that is nutrition. And it turns out our bodies actually are typically starved for nutrients. If we're battling with a chronic illness, our immune system does not have the nutrients it needs to regulate itself. We need to eat those nutrients that our bodies need to heal. And so we need to be switching this focus from a list of no's to a list of yeses, but also a list of things to add more in. So what that looks like meat, fish, shellfish, poultry, quality animal fats, vegetables, fruit, natural, unrefined, expeller-pressed vegetable oils like olive oil, sea vegetables, seaweed, and edible fungi like mushrooms. Doesn't sound so bad, right? Okay, let's focus on what we do eat. That's actually a lot of stuff. But I want to even go a step further. And I don't want to just focus on the things that are okay and a positive mindset. That's great, but I want to go one step further. I'm going to focus on eating the most nutrient-dense foods available to us because that is how we're going to correct nutritional deficiencies and actually provide our bodies the resources that they need to heal and stop attacking ourselves. And that means eating more seafood, more organ meat, and more vegetables. So seafood is really critically important. It's one of the most nutrient-dense foods that we can eat. For most of us, it's our dominant source of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA, which are absolutely critical for immune health. Huge range of vitamins and minerals, including being a really important source of trace minerals that are really difficult to get from land-based foods. These are all the minerals that are especially rich in seafood that people with autoimmune disease have a tendency to be deficient in and that the immune system actually requires in order to regulate. So when it comes to how often to eat fish, really, the more, the better. But just approaching it from a balancing omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid intake, if you are eating high-quality pasture-raised meat, fish should be on your plate about 3 times a week, if not more. There's no cap here. You could be a pescatarian and eat entirely seafood-based diet. Shellfish and sea vegetables, minimums for that come from the mineral content because these are such mineral-rich foods, and especially minerals that are very important for immune function. And those should probably be on your plate about once a week. So fish is kind of an easy sell. There was that other thing I mentioned. Offal. So offal includes organ meat, liver, kidney, heart. It also includes other unusual cuts, basically things that are not steak and hamburger, not muscle, that would come from an animal. So things like feet, skin, bone marrow, bone broth would be considered offal. And offal, especially organ meat, is really the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. There's some shellfish that can compete, but really, you can't get that kind of density of nutrients anywhere else. And it tends to be the nutrients that are most vital for our immune systems to function normally. There's some really, really special nutrients in organ meat that we don't see in very many other foods, like coenzyme Q10, like conjugated linoleic acid is very concentrated in muscle meat. You get this great balance of vitamin A to vitamin D to vitamin K2. It's really, really important to eat offal. So I know what you're saying. It's not called offal for nothing. I know it's tough. I know it's tough to look at offal. But it's really, really, really important to be including in our diets, all of our diets. And really, we should be aiming to eat offal in about the same percentage as we find it in the animal, as a minimum. And this is important from a nutrient standpoint, but also ecologically and economically. Eating snout to tail is the best strategy that we have for balancing nutrition from animal-based foods. And so when you look at how much of an animal is actually offal, it's somewhere between a fifth and a quarter. So if you're eating your minimum amounts of seafood a week, that's going to translate to 3 to 5 meals a week of offal. That's not all bone broth. Liver has to be in there somewhere. And it's really vital. It's really, really vital to be incorporating this into our diets. And you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. Okay, so let's move on to vegetables. We'll leave that behind. Everybody likes vegetables, right? Everyone's like a little bit happier with vegetables than liver. So vegetables are also really, really important. I think we're used to thinking of these animal-based superfoods as being especially important for regulating the immune system, but there's some things in vegetables that we really can't get in adequate quantities from animal foods. You really need both, especially magnesium. Magnesium is much, much higher in, say, dark leafy greens. Vegetables are a tremendous source of antioxidants, and your immune system needs antioxidants in order to function normally. So things like carotenoids, polyphenols, chlorophyll is a nutrient. I mean, that's what makes plants be able to produce energy and be green and all that good stuff. It's actually really, really important anti-cancer activities and immune function regulating activities. Plants have glycine betaine, which is really important for methylation. And of course, they have fiber. This is really, really important for nurturing the right type of gut bacteria in our digestive systems, which then influence the immune system and have a really profound influence on chronic disease. So eating a lot of vegetables is important. And so I'm like, I know you're all relieved I'm not talking about liver anymore. But let's talk about vegetables a little bit more. It's really important to eat variety. And eating snout to tail and eating seafood, that kind of builds in variety because you're getting your variety of nutrients from eating different kinds of meat. When it comes to vegetables, the way you get variety is by making different choices, ideally daily. And a great way to do that is to focus on eating the rainbow. And part of the reason why this gives such great nutrient balance in your meals is because different colors are actually associated with different nutrients. So for example, orange and red pigments come from carotenoids. So when you're picking orange and red vegetables, they tend to be higher in antioxidant carotenoids. And all of these nutrients are also pigments, and that's why you get different things from different color vegetables. In terms of how much, a lot. As a general rule of thumb, most of us should be aiming to eat between 8 and 10 servings of vegetables a day. If you eat 3 meals a day, that's 3 servings of vegetables at every meal, including breakfast. And those should come from leafy greens, colorful vegetables, eating the rainbow, cruciferous vegetables, which is the family that includes cabbage and broccoli and kale and turnips and arugula and Brussels sprouts, roots and tubers, things like sweet potatoes, carrots, parsnips. And this also includes the vegetable-like fruits, the things that we treat as vegetables because they're very low sugar, like winter squash and zucchini, but they're actually botanically fruit. Now, I know that's a lot of vegetables. I know that most of us are not used to eating that many vegetables, and it's okay if you warm up to this slowly. So if you're currently eating the more typical, say, 3 to 5 servings of vegetables a day, which is actually, you're already miles ahead of the standard American diet if you're eating 3 to 5 servings of vegetables a day, you can build up to that 8 to 10 slowly. And it's actually really advisable because it takes a shift in the type of bacteria growing in your gut to be able to digest and get the nutrients out of those vegetables. So building up slowly, mixing raw and cooked is sort of the way to go. And if you're having a lot of digestive distress from eating a lot of vegetables, part of that is requiring that shift in gut bacteria. Part of that is probably requiring some changes to your meal hygiene, maybe some digestive support supplements. There's other ways to go there. But everybody should be able to slowly get up to that high vegetable content, and that should be a minimum. I can tell you that I eat on an average day more like 16 to 20 servings of vegetables, and I enjoy it. So once we have that base, hitting that minimum content of seafood and organ meat, yes, I'm talking about that again, vegetables, then we get to round out with the other foods that were in that sort of paleo autoimmune protocol pyramid. So that's where we round out with other cuts of meat, poultry, other types of, say, vegetables like mushrooms, fruit, and quality fats. So that's sort of like guidelines for the week. But what does that actually translate to on your plate? What are you actually looking at when you sit down to a meal? Well, part of answering that question is talking about macronutrients. When most of us are looking at a plate, we're thinking, okay, I've got my proteins, I've got my carbs, I've got my fat. But the truth is that an optimal ratio of protein to carbs to fat is not something that is broadly applicable. It's something that is individual. And every one of us can experiment with how much of our diet comes from protein or carbohydrates or fat to see how we feel. And there's really no solid recommendation for a place to start, because as soon as you're picking good quality food, your hormones are going to be well regulated, and it's really, there's going to be a wide range of what's working best for you. So instead of thinking about protein and carbohydrates and fat, I want you to think about just picking the best quality, the most variety you can of nutrient-dense foods. Those nutrient-dense seafood and organ meat and vegetables, and then rounding out with these other foods. Now, I know I just mentioned nutrient density. You can handle it. I know you can do it. You can hide it from yourself. You don't even need to taste it. You can bury it in food, but eat liver. So when you're starting to put together your plate, I want you to think about starting as a starting point, approximately 50% of your calories from animal-based foods and 50% of your calories from plant-based foods. Now, this could mean a huge range of macronutrient ratios because you're getting protein and fat from animal-based foods and you're getting carbohydrates and fat from plant-based foods. So you can do this as a low-carbohydrate diet, as a moderate carbohydrate diet, as a low-fat diet, as a high-protein diet or a low-protein diet, wherever you want to go with this. But start thinking about half animal-based and half plant-based calories. Now remember that typically animal-based foods are more calorie-dense than plant-based foods. So that's not going to translate to half of your plate being meat and half of your plate being vegetables. It's going to look more like this. It's going to look a lot more like a quarter of your plate is meat or fish or oysters or liver. And the other 3/4 is going to be a variety of vegetables. Now, you don't need to make 3 vegetable side dishes with every meal. Like, that's some intense cooking, and that's not everybody's thing. But you can make 1 vegetable side dish that has 3 different vegetables in it, and fill the rest of your plate with vegetables. And so this is your starting point. And then you can change, right? You can change how fatty your meat is. You can change whether or not your vegetables are dressed with olive oil or if they're plain. You can change whether or not you've got a starchy vegetable on this plate or you've got non-starchy vegetables. How much of this is leafy greens? You get to play with that. And chances are really, really good is if you start with this starting point, as you play, everything's going to work. Because all of this is about nutrient density. It's about getting the nutrients that your body needs to heal and for your immune system to regulate. And the best way to get the nutrients that you need in the right quantities to each other, the right balance, is to eat variety and to choose the most nutrient-dense foods available to you, which is organ meat, seafood, and vegetables. And then other than that, you just get to eat and enjoy. It's really, really important that we don't see food as a source of stress and that we see food, as nourishing our bodies. And so you get to experiment in your own life to find that balance between what works optimally for you, what does your body thrive on versus what does your body tolerate. And every one of us is going to have a place of sustainability somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. And that's something we all get to play with, because the most important thing is that we can stick with it and that we can do this long term. And if that means baby steps, that means baby steps. And so that is how we put together an autoimmune protocol plate. I'm doing a book signing right after Q&A at the Victory Belt table, and I'm also doing a cooking demo this afternoon.